the challenge will be around for 2019, as we're in the early part of 2019, for the workplace as it relates to workplace discrimination.
What I appreciate about now is the incredible role that HR is going to play in this process.
Yeah.
And I think that they will probably be, well, two things. One, either totally not used because the situation is so dire, or used so much that they end up just collapsing because of being overworked. But society has, in the last, I want to say 2 years, but it really is 3 because I think it started during the presidential race. And, you know, let's just be honest, I don't care which politics are. Things have changed.
Yes.
Under this administration. Now that there is at least the perception, which I happen to believe is a reality, that okay to come out with some of the attitudes that I think had been for years, certainly since the Civil Rights Act, have been, we've been working with society to try to rid ourselves of. Mm-hmm. And the attitudes made perfect sense if you think about our history. That doesn't mean I endorse them.
Right.
It just means that well, I actually had a course, a first-year Odyssey learning community, and the name of it was, seriously, you still talk about slavery? And that's because that's the way that issue always comes up for students, because they can't believe that we're talking about this. Well, you know, my grandma, who didn't die until I was 17, in fact, I think I was a senior in high school, she lived with her grandma who was a slave. Okay, I mean, and she was born in 1815, and so slavery didn't come for 50 years. And that's who was in the house when I looked at the 1900 census. That's who was in the house with her, my grandma, as a little girl. Mm-hmm. We are not talking about a long time.
Yeah.
You cannot deal with where we are today without thinking about those things, because just like the vast majority of the things that we deal with every day in our own lives personally, it passed down. Just like the fact that if it's Christmas, you have a Christmas tree gets passed down. I mean, nobody thinks, you know, at some point we need to stop this Christmas tree business because it was started as a druid, some sort of druid ceremony for worshiping trees or something. I mean, you just don't question it. It's Christmas, you've had trees all the time, and when it gets to be your turn, trees coming in the house at Christmas time, right? Those attitudes that people have, and I don't want to minimize them because they can be, some of them are really vicious. But when you think about where they came from, the fact that black folk were never brought to this country to be treated as human beings, millennia of slavery. And if you think about, there was nothing before, and then that's the way we got introduced to the culture, to the country. And then it was only 1964 when somebody said we should be treated equally. And I don't even sort of count that time in between 1865 when the Civil War ended and 1964 when the Civil Rights Act passed, because that was all pretty much Jim Crow.
Jim Crow. Mm-hmm.
Which, when you think about it, makes sense given what they were working with. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about from 1600s, early 1600s until 1865, us only being here and being subservient because in order for slavery to work, you had to make us think that. Mm-hmm. And you had to make yourself think that you were superior, and you had to be treated as an other and as not human. What would make people think that in 1865 on April 9th when they signed that
it would all end?
That it would all end. I mean, it was the only thing people ever knew before. Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me that it took 99 years to come up with the Civil Rights Act. That doesn't mean it was right. It doesn't mean any of this makes sense. It's just, that's the reality of the situation. And within that, the vacuum of it, it does make sense. Mm-hmm. It does make sense that if that's the way you've always treated somebody, that when you say, okay, you can't do that anymore, or that you have to change the system, that the system would be changed. It's like, but I'm not changing it
Right.
any more than I have to. And it takes 99 years for you to say, well, you know, how's that working for you? It didn't work real well for these people that it was supposed to be changed for. And then, if you even think about from 1964, and Lord knows things did not change on July 5th or 6th, 1964, when it became effective.
Right.
The University of Georgia last year and the year before had, they invited back the first graduating class of black folk, and it was deeply, deeply moving. Maybe 6 people.
Wow.
Okay, now they had come in 61, 67. When you think about that, that's not a lot of folks.
No.
If you think about 1964 to 2019, that's still not a long time. I mean, people were coming out of Jim Crow. We're talking about my dad. We're talking about me when I was little. I didn't realize it, but, you know, it took me forever to realize that the reason that we stopped by the side of the road to go to the bathroom when we went to my grandmother's in Virginia from D.C. was not because that's what you did. It was because you couldn't stop as a black person and go to the bathroom in a gas station. I mean, who knew? That, when you think about that being in my lifetime, and you're thinking about millions of people, all of whom had their own experience and attitudes coming to it, you realize it's more than a notion to change a whole society. That doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm okay with that. It's just that you got to deal with what's real.
Yeah.
And that is the reality of the situation. And even there's a continuum. You know, there are the people who will go hold the tiki torches and beat somebody to within an inch of their life, or run into them at a rally. And then there are other people who might use the word black instead of African American.
Right.
Okay, those are very different sorts of situations, and we should not treat them the same.
Right.
But I think that what we do when we get upset about it, and we understand, you think about it, you realize that that sort of treating everybody the same and getting upset about something like that really doesn't do much, especially in this polarized time that we live in 2019. Because those people who could be your allies, who, for instance, use the wrong term,
Right.
their heart might be in the right place. They just weren't quite sure what the term was to use. But treating them like the tiki torch carrying people is just not going to be helpful.
No.
Think in terms of the macro picture as well as the micro picture. The micro picture is what happens on a day-to-day basis, minute to minute. The macro picture is the biggest one of how this fits into society and as we march on in time as a society. It is so incredibly helpful for me to read the kind of history books that I do. And I do it because I keep trying to understand. Like, what is this about? Is this okay? Does it fit? And when I look at it and I try to place us in that picture, I realize, you know what, this is what societies do. You know, they have waxes and wanes. Congress being polarized. This is not the only time we've been at this place. No, that's happened before.
Yeah.
So when I think about the role of race and gender and sexual orientation discrimination in 2019 and sort of how HR fits into it and what that role is, I think it's extremely important to understand that it's been polarized, and you've got these people coming out of the woodwork who did not feel like it was safe to say and do the kind of things they were doing on the one hand. But I like to be optimistic, so I also like what happened in the 2018 midterm elections, where people said, you know what, this isn't working for me, that's not the country I live in or want to live in, and I can do something about that because we live in a democracy. I can vote, or I can run for office, or I can support people who are doing those things, and that's what they did. And one of the most destructive pieces about the election, the 2016 election, was the impact that it was going to probably have on the court. Because law is what I deal in, and I understand that who makes up that court and how they look at those issues makes a big difference.
Yeah, and it has an impact for lifetimes and lifetimes.
Oh my
lifetimes.
gosh, yes. And when you're talking about excluding people from things like trans not being able to be in the military despite all the evidence, which is clear of it not being this awful thing that they said. When you think about depriving those people of being able to serve in the ways that they can, and it not causing all of this stuff that they originally thought it would, but research showed that it did not, that's just really bizarre. I mean, who wants a country that has certain groups of people that they're going to exclude from certain kinds of things, or where they're going to let one group totally dictate the quality of life of other groups of people? You think about the impact that that can have over generations. With the court we have, that part makes me sad. Everything has been politicized, and it's going to come down to us doing something about that. And HR is so well placed, because they can, when these issues come up, they can make sure that the procedures are the policies that accompany.
Because that's what we always go back to. That's what we have to go back to.
That's why it's so crazy to be at this time, because it's like, what's the procedure? Okay, because this is not it, and I didn't think you could just drag something out of the blue and do it. I mean, I thought there were rules about this, right? They were called laws in some places, and you're just totally ignoring them. They're really well placed, because if we go back, I mean, America is a country of laws. We love procedures. That's why we have them, because it gives predictability, and it gives a way of being able to institutionalize our values. And despite the fact that it's 2019, still use the kind of procedures and processes that have institutionalized those kind of values to do the work that we need to do.
Yeah. Thank you so very much.
You are so
Thank you so
welcome.
very much.
Thank you for providing this service for people, because it's tremendous for them to be able to just push a button, get that kind of information that you're offering to them, and not even have to pay for it, not even have to have you in there.
Yeah.
Of course, it's better if they do have you in there and get the whole package.
That's right. But it's just, thank you so very much for giving your time. It is truly, truly appreciative.
Oh, I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah.